Welcome in everyone, this is Sean with MTG808 Jr. and today we're going to be taking a look at a deck tech, or a couple deck techs, for post-rotation builds of mono red aggro, one of the most iconic archetypes in Magic. It is losing some tools come rotation, but it's also keeping some tools, so we're going to take a look at what a starting point might be for that archetype. We've got at least two that seem viable. But before we do that, just want to make sure everyone knows about our scholarship tournament. We'll be running a scholarship tournament this coming December, and then potentially a second scholarship tournament this school year in May. That is, of course, dependent on us reaching our $400 a month goal here on Patreon, but I am optimistic that we will reach that goal, so plan on there being two scholarship tournaments here on Oahu for the youth Magic players here. Alright, and of course those tournaments will be standard Pauper. So rotation doesn't happen until October 5th, but once rotation happens, we're losing 4 sets worth of cards. Anytime that there is a big chunk of the format leaving, the general power level of all the decks kind of lowers. So we're going to look at a starting point for mono red aggro today, and we have two different builds of it. This one is featuring Wizards, and this one is featuring no wizard synergies, but still some pretty powerful cards. So if we'll have links to these text versions of the deck in the description, you can check that out. But for now, let's move on down here. We'll start off with Wizards. So this is a build of red that RJ played to top 4 of one of our recent tournaments. I think it was last month. His Magic coach instructor, Mr. Ulip, put this deck together for him, and G2 Journey Mage, of course, is the reason that this is called a wizard deck. If you have another wizard, when G2 Journey Mage comes into play, it deals 2 damage to each opponent, or to your opponent, and that gives the deck a little bit of reach. And then the wizards that are featured in this deck here, this is a big one. I missed this, that this guy was a wizard when M19 first came out, but it is a wizard. Sophia Shino Pyromancer, a great 2-drop, 2 damage. When it comes into play, 2 damage to target player or planeswalker. And then, of course, G2 Lava Runner is a wizard. 1 mana, 1/2. If you have 2 or more instants and or sorceries in your graveyard, it gets +1/+0 and has haste. So, it's kind of an okay 1-drop. But then if you draw it, to play on turn 1, but then if you draw it later in the game, odds are that, it'll be a 2/2 with haste for 1 mana. So that guy is pretty solid. We'll just work our way up the curve here. We've got Fanatical Firebrand. I'm pretty sure that if you're playing red aggro, you just have to be playing this card. It's too good. 1 mana, 1/1 haste. Hit them the first turn of the game. And, if you draw it when the board is mucked up, hopefully they have a 1 toughness creature. You can trade this with it, or if they are at 1 life, you can just hit them directly. So Fanatical Firebrand, great 1-drop here. Continuing with the creatures, we have Goblin Trailblazer. So 2 mana, 2/1 with Menace. Menace is a really important ability for helping to push damage through, which is what the red deck is all about. And, having 1 toughness is a liability. There are a lot of spells in the format that kind of blank 1 toughness creatures, but a lot of the format is also creature combat. So having Menace tying up your opponent's blockers is really good. If you want to hedge away from 1 toughness creatures, you could play not Firebrand. Here, Fathom Fleet Firebrand. So 2 mana, 2/2. It's a solid creature, and then if you have a bunch of extra mana lying around, maybe it's late in the game, you emptied your hand, you can use your extra mana to pump it up. So this is probably the next best 2-drop option that the deck has, but I like the Menace Pirate here. So we're playing 20 creatures. I guess that this is just kind of like the quintessential aggro deck, right? 20 lands, 20 creatures, 20 spells. So our spells include Short Sword, right? All around great card. Helps you win combat. You can trade up. You can use it on offense and defense. Just a very versatile card. Of course, we need spells in order to turn on G2 Lava Runner. So here we have 4 Shock, right? Just all around great card. Oftentimes trades up, usually trades 1 for 1. And then, of course, if your opponent is at 2, you can just kill them. Sheevan Fire does not go to the face, but if you draw 5 mana, you can pay 5 mana to deal 4 damage and kill a larger creature. And then we are running Run Amok. Our deck is very much trying to attack, so the downside here of Run Amok is not terribly relevant, right? Target attacking creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. That makes your creatures huge, right? Your opponent might block your 2/1 with a 1/1, thinking they're getting a good trade, and then you just run amok, deal a bunch of damage to them, and you get to keep your creature. We're only playing 3 run amoks because, of course, you can only cast it when you are attacking. Sometimes, especially in aggro mirrors, you might find yourself on your back foot, and having a bunch of run amoks in your hand in that situation will be very bad. We are playing 2 Warlord's Fury here, just trying to up the spell count. This thing is just all around. It's never terribly bad, right? 1 mana, sorcery, draw a card. So worst case scenario, you pay 1 and it replaces itself. And then creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn, right? Because we are playing a couple of low toughness guys, giving your creatures first strike and the ability to just kind of punch through damage seems relevant. And it's another spell to help turn on Gitu Lava Runner. So those are the spells. We've also got Lightning Strike here. Now I know that a lot of people watching these videos might be looking at them to play Pauper or Standard Pauper on Magic the Gathering Arena, and they don't allow Lightning Strike in that format. We do allow Lightning Strike because we allow downshifted uncommons in the tournaments that we play. So Lightning Strike was common in Theros, even though it isn't uncommon in Ixalan and in M19, so it's legal in Standard, and it was a common before, so it's legal in Standard Pauper, according to us. But if you are playing by those rules, you don't want to play Lightning Strike, you can play more Sheevan Fires, you can play more Run Amoks, Warlord's Fury is fine. I'm pretty sure you want to keep this slot to be an instant or sorcery, mostly because of Gitu Lava Runner. But, there are other options of what you can play there. And I'm sure that Guilds of Ravnica will come out with something, right? A lot of the cards that you might want to play here are already in our board, like Lightning Axe, Dual Shot is fine, Radiant Lightning, Active Treason. Any of these would be fine inclusions in the Lightning Strike slot. All right, so that's the creatures. That's the main deck, 20 mountains, right? We don't want to get mana flooded. But we do want to, be able to cast multiple spells in each turn. So ideally, we want to end up at about 3 or 4 mana with this deck. So we're only playing 20 lands. Looking at the sideboard, Dual Shot and Radiant Lightning help clean up little small 1 toughness creatures. Smelt if you are playing against a deck that has a bunch of artifacts, especially if there's equipment or they're playing artifact creatures. Active Treason if your opponent's game plan is to just play a big fat creature, you can steal their blocker and then hit them with it. And then Lightning Axe is very good at just going to the dome, right? You get most of your damage in early, your opponent kills all your creatures, thinks they stabilize, and then you get to 5 mana and you just tell them to catch 5 damage to the face. And then Jousting Lance, if your opponent's game plan is to muck up the board with medium-sized creatures, Jousting Lance is really good at helping you push through. And then also, it's pretty good against, or it might be worth bringing in against control decks as well, because they have to, you don't want all these spells in your deck anyway, right? Like Run Amok, Sheevan Fire, they don't really have a ton of targets for those cards. Run Amok is high risk because you can cast it on your creature and then they use a removal spell on it in response. So Run Amok is a big liability in the control matchup. So you want to cut those cards and then just have stuff that goes to the face or makes your creatures more deadly, right? So oftentimes the control matchup comes down to them killing all your creatures, and then you draw a creature, they're out of removal spells, they have to wait a little bit before they find an answer to it, and then if you have a Jousting Lance in play, then it'll just make that one creature go all the way. So that's Mono Red Wizards, built around Gitu Journey Mage. Now, Journey Mage having only 12 total wizards in the deck. If you have one in your hand, then that means there's only 11 other wizards in the deck. It doesn't always go to the face, so this might not be the most consistent way to build red, so we're going to share a second way that could potentially be good. Instead of Gitu Journey Mage, and in our 3-drop slot, we are playing Frilled Deathspitter. It's very similar in the sense that, it's a 3-mana 3/2, and then it has the potential to hit them in the face, even if they have a good blocker for it. So when Frilled Deathspitter is dealt damage, it deals 2 damage to target opponent or a planeswalker, right? If your opponent kills this with a Murder or a Moment of Craving, then you're not going to get your 2 damage out of it. But in most cases, you're probably going to trade with this in combat, or it might die to a burn spell, and then you will get your 2 damage out of it. It'll just be on the back end instead of on the front end. So Frilled Deathspitter replaces Gitu Journey Mage in our 3-drop slot. We are playing one more land in this version just because our curve is a little bit higher, right? Cut Warlord's Fury from the deck because we're no longer running Gitu Lava Runner, right? Gitu Lava Runner isn't necessarily the best 1-drop, but we were playing it because it is a wizard and it turned on Gitu Journey Mage. Instead of Gitu Lava Runner, we are playing Fire Shrine Keeper here. Right, 1 mana, 1/1 menace, and then if you get to 8 mana, you can sacrifice it. It deals 2 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures. That ability will almost never come up, but just having a 1 mana, 1/1 menace means that this guy, if you play it on turn 1, it'll probably get in 3 or 4 damage. And then in the late game, assuming that you play other creatures as well, it might get in for even more than that. So Fire Shrine Keeper is a fine 1-drop. Especially when you start putting Short Sword on it and supporting it with Run Amok and stuff like that. So Fire Shrine Keeper is a fine 1-drop. And then we are also playing an extra 2-drop, right? We have 2 Fathom Fleet Firebrands to support our Goblin Trailblazers here. But other than that, the deck is pretty similar. We cut 1 Sheevan Fire just because we need less spells in the deck. We wanted to play a few more creatures. And then the sideboard is pretty much the same. So whichever way you like building red, if you want to be wizards or if you want to just be straight aggro, red is usually a good choice, especially early in a format when the other decks are just trying to like figure out what they're trying to do. Red can just be like, okay, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to execute my game plan and just try to kill you as fast as possible. So that is the mono red aggro deck. Mono red, no matter what the format is, no matter what the rotation is, there's usually a red-based aggro deck. Last thing I want to touch on is there have been some spoilers that have come out. The website that I like to look at spoilers at is Mythic Spoiler. I'll leave a link to that in the description of this video. There are some sweet cards that have been spoiled. Not too many commons yet, but in terms of this deck, there are some potential cards that you could include. So this guy is a 5-drop, which is a little expensive for a deck with 20 or 21 land. But if you did want to up the curve of the deck a little bit, add some power to it, this guy is a reasonable inclusion. I'm a little wary of it because it only has 2 health, but a 5 mana 4/2 haste, and then Mentor is the new keyword for Boros, which is the red-white guild. So Mentor says whenever this creature attacks, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature with less power. So if you attack with this and your Frilled Death Spitter, it has less power than Barging Sergeant, so you can put a +1/+1 counter on your Frilled Death Spitter. So this guy, I don't know if it'll go into these exact builds of mono red, but it is something to keep in mind if you are building red aggro. And then the second card for red is Direct Current. It's a 3 mana sorcery. Direct Current deals 2 damage to any target. So this is just like a strictly worse shock at face value, especially because it's a sorcery and it costs 3 times as much as shock for the same card text. But it has an extra line of text here that's called Jumpstart. Jumpstart is the Izzet keyword, so the blue-red guild has the keyword Jumpstart in it. So Jumpstart says you may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a card in addition to paying its other costs. So you can pay it once for 3 mana, deal 2 damage to something, it's sitting in your graveyard, and then let's say the game goes on a little bit, you have some extra lands in your hand, you can pay 3 mana again, discard one of those lands or some other card that's not being used, and then exile this from your graveyard and do it again. So Jumpstart, it is potentially 4 damage, right? You do have to pay 2 cards into it, but it is potentially 4 damage, which might be good at finishing off aggro or control decks. It might be good at controlling other aggro decks. If they have a bunch of 2 toughness creatures, Direct Current can kill one, and then if they play another one later, you can use it again. So I'm not sure how powerful this card is. My first instinct when I look at Jumpstart is that it's just strictly worse than Flashback, which essentially allowed you to play the card again from your graveyard at usually a higher cost, and then exile it, so you didn't have to discard a card, so all the Flashback cards just inherently had card advantage built into them. This is not card advantage, but it does give you the same effect again, and when the effect is something like direct damage removal, it might be worth including. So keep your eye on these 2 cards. These are the only 2 mono red common cards that have been spoiled so far. But there are some other sweet spoilers. I think I'm going to add this on to the Mono White Aggro video deck tech that we released a while ago. This guy is great. 1 mono, 1/1 lifelink flying. It's going to go right into the Mono White Aggro decks. Kind of like the next best thing to Sacred Cat. But anyway, that is our video for the day. Thank you for stopping by. Hope you are enjoying brewing for Standard Pauper. Once again, rotation happens on the 5th when Guilds of Ravnica gets released. Pre-releases are September 29th to 30th. And if you appreciate our content, of course, watching it is a great way to support it, especially watching it, liking it, and subscribing to make sure that you continue getting that content in your YouTube channel. And then also, if you want to go the extra mile, support us a little bit more, please consider becoming a Patreon subscriber. You can choose how much you want to donate, and all of the Patreon money goes directly to supporting youth magic here on Oahu, whether that's the form of scholarship tournaments, just prizes for our regular tournaments, or just making all of this project go. So thank you for stopping by, and I will catch you next time. Peace.